Okay, thank you very much. Can you guys hear me? Good. Okay, so thank you for your time. Welcome to the afternoon session. I'm JW. I hope you guys have a good lunch break. So as you guys recognize that I'm not 100% in good condition, but nevertheless, I don't want to miss the opportunity to get to know you and also presenting my presentation that I prepare. So please understand that I try to go through my presentation a bit fast so that my voice is still functioning until the end of the session. Good. So my subject today is about melting Korean business strengths into the German cultural context. So in my presentation, I want to talk about two different nations, Korea and Germany. And in this context, please understand that Korea, when I say Korea, it is South Korea, not North Korea. So, we're talking about a lot about kind of technology and AI, but why I brought this subject is still in the current world, in my opinion, it is still very valid discussion how we can build a organization or a team from multiple people having even multiple background and make it perform as it's designed to be. My agenda, therefore, here is I would like to bring you a bit of the understanding about the Korean business mindset, the business culture against the German one. Of course, I will not go too much deeper into the German culture, considering that you probably know well already or relatively better compared to the knowledge that you have about Korea. And I'll try to present something that I have learned, what has been similarity and the differences. And based on my experience, how we could bring them together so that they can communicate better without having a big barrier. First, myself. My name is Jongwook. I'm native Korean, born in Korea, studied law in Korea, Germany, and France, and living in Germany since 2004. And I have privilege to work in the different industry and the different company, but interesting-wise, the Korean company in Germany in the different format. Different format mean the regional headquarters, sometimes the local responsible. And the industry-wise, I work for the shipping company, and I work for the car manufacturer, and I'm currently working for pharma company. As Jasmine said, is the company called Celltrion. It is a biopharmaceutical company. The company Celltrion founded in 2002 in Korea. So you see that the history of the company is relatively short and very young company you can consider. The company started with the CMO business. So if you are not familiar with, it is contractual manufacturing organization, which means that you produce medicine for other original patent holder. And the company became a bit popular in the pharmaceutical industry because they launched the world's first monoclonal antibody biosimilar. So the sounds maybe it's not familiar, the word the biosimilar. You can consider this one is a kind of the medicine that has the same or similar efficacy as the original medicine, but in terms of the bio perspective, not the chemical medicine, but the biomedicine. That's why there is no word of copy medicine in this world, there is a word similar. And interestingly, within 20 years, the company made it become the second most valuable pharma company in Korea as of today. Korea and Germany differ in many ways. According to the Hofstede culture map, we can see the diverse dimensions which are differ from the two different countries. In terms of the power distance, some of you want to understand what is the power distance, so you can also interpret it in this one as acceptance of the authority. It is about people are accepting more easily the existing or structured hierarchical order or authority. So in this context, Korea score higher than Germany. And individualism, maybe you guys are not surprised, in German has very high level of individualism and focusing on the importance of the personal happiness or family life. And on the other hand, you can see very low score of the Korea, and you can consider Korea is the society focusing on the collectivistic and focusing on the group rather than individual. And motivation toward achievement and success, the German is slightly higher. And uncertainty avoidance, and both are quite high, but Korea show a bit higher tendency in this perspective. And long-term orientation perspective, and German are not low, but Korea score here 100 out of 100. So long-term orientation, what you have to understand is it's not about the long-term strategy. It is about the long-term expectation that you wish that, or you imagine that the future could be the better, so that you can actually hold up a bit more resilient and sacrifice the current happiness. That is long-term orientation. And indulgence perspective, you can also interpret as a little bit optimistic. So both countries, I would say, is a little bit low, but Korea is lower than Germany. If someone who does not know, who don't know what is Hofstede, yes? The Gerhard Hofstede was the Dutch social scientist, many of you know, look like, and the social psychologist, and was a professor in the University of the Maastricht in Netherlands. He's best known for developing of the kind of framework and measuring the cultural dimension in the global perspective. So the data you saw is already created or surveyed or examined in the age of 1960s and 70s when he was particularly working at IBM. So he did a global survey targeting more than 100,000 of the IBM people. So that was the known as kind of first cultural study targeting the global scale. It is quite old. Why I took this study for today is I think there is a few elements, in my opinion, is still very valid and showing a good contrast between these two cultures. Back to the data or back to the graph. So within the different dimension, in my point of view, there's three elements quite standing out. Power distance, individualism, long-term orientation. So I don't mean that there is a lot of similarity, but I think these three elements for me telling very well and also explain, underpinning very well that what I'm going to talk about, the difference between Korea and German. If I putting in this dimension into the maybe descriptive statement, you can say that Korean people or Korean society has a tendency of a higher acceptance of the existing authority and hierarchical order and just follow the authority, right? And individual, compared to the German, has significantly focused on the collectivitism, so that they consider individual is less important than the group. And as long-term orientations go very high, that there must be something behind why people think that future could be the better, even you can sacrifice the current happiness. Some of you might wonder, could this apply to the overall in European-wise? Yes or no? Just I select two more countries, Spain and France. In terms of the power distance, probably you guys also could imagine that France and Spain show a bit higher compared to the German. But the other element, especially in particular individualism and long-term orientation, again, the Korea show the distinctive difference compared to the other European country, even if you wanted to include the others. Why Korean society or Korean people has that kind of, or expressing or showing that kind of the cultural dimension? I have to bring you a bit of the history class, but don't be afraid, I'm not going to talk too much about the depths. But let's look at probably 100 years back. So modern history, like a little bit more than 100 years ago, the Korea was one country. So by the way, so South and North Korea was one, but was under the governance of the Japanese Empire. So was annexed by Japan at the beginning of 1904. So that has lasted more than 30 years. Right after the capitulation, right after the World War II, the Korea separated into two, and South and North. And right after that, the Korean War happened. So Korean War lasts 3 years, between 1950 to 1953. So I want you to use a little bit of imagination that the Far Eastern small country was quite poor, quite rough situation, and after your freedom that you guys went through the war, right? So during the 3 years of the war, I can tell you easily that Korea was completely destroyed at ground zero. And then Korea started recovering from the ground zero destruction and try to do something. Let's just make a rough assumption that Korea became recovered from the war in 1960. Yeah? But where is it now? South Korea alone, not talking about North Korea. So we probably consider South Korea is kind of one of the leading economic country. Yeah? So sometime people like to give a ranking, so maybe in the top 10, top 7, top 11. So if you're looking at the kind of the speed of the development, if you're considering additionally time of the change, that happened less than 50 years. It's less than 2 generations. It must have influenced something. And at the same time, South Korea, known as there's no natural resource at all, and the South Korea start their industrialization with importing natural resource and selling the product. Without need to mention, right? So such a kind of dramatic change of the society and such a speed of the change have influence on the people's mentality and anchors people's work ethic. Small public sector, there is no public sector that you can consider that there is a secure job, so you will choose secure job instead of the competitive high paying. There is no such a thing. And the country as a whole was oriented not in the domestic market, but the market abroad that you never know, that you didn't learn before. So the ambiguity is high. And at that time, the whole family investing education and government also emphasizing a lot of education for what? So in the domestic, they're still empty. And therefore, the labor market has been quite competitive. So all this kind of the social dimension must have influenced people's work ethic, isn't it? And luckily, over the time, when you witness the economy is somehow growing, and maybe people have a kind of tendency that we have to work hard, then we can see some prosperous in the future. I'm trying to explain a bit of relation with the kind of long-term orientation, probably. There's an interesting element also has developed the Korean society as it is. Looks like development of the country must have been based on significantly on the human talent, human capital, because I mentioned the country was completely destructive and there was no natural resource and there is no secure job, meaning that many things has happened must have been based on the human capital, talent. But interesting wise, as you can read from the collectivism over the individualism, the individual talent has been quite overlooked. The reason why is quite simple. Because society has been emphasized a lot about education, there has been sufficient supply of educated people. So industry doesn't have to appreciate that much about the supply of talented people, educated people. And educated people sometimes also doesn't recognize the difference how good you are. Another point is about how Korean company that you see here, probably you also recognize, Korean company start. So in 1960, 50, 60, 70, there has been founder, started their business from the very small shop, supermarket at the corner of the small town. And they became a chairman of Samsung and LG and Hyundai, probably some of them you even know by now. And there were people who looks like more charismatic, even looks like hero for their country, and they are providing the job for the society. So they are maybe the truly talented people who greatly contributing back to society. So it is about relative comparison. By the way, it is my own opinion. So it is a relative comparison. So there's a high amount of the talent provided to the market, but there is charismatic people creating their own business, and you are joining their company, serving for them. And as additional information for you, this company is still run by their family member. So now, I hope you have a bit of better understanding. As I said, I don't want to talk too much about history. There's a lot more. But I hope you have a slight tinge of understanding. Maybe it could be, that history could influence to the Korean people's business mentality. Yeah? So power distance, you accept that if there is authority and you're serving for them. And I should sacrifice, I should not put myself too much because we have to work together. And looks like the economy is growing fast, and there is also more secure job is coming, that all society focusing on the future prosperous than the current happiness. By the way, again, this is my version of the interpretation. Together with this one, I wanted to bring some more additional element before I go to share my own lesson that I collected. The additional number one is from the study from Erin Meyer, 2017. She's the professor from INSEAD, and she also developed the culture map, just like similar as whole. But it's a little bit with a different dimension. And here, she identified, of course, the different nation, a different country has different kind of behavior. And in terms of the leadership, Germany and Korea are both hierarchical. Yeah? But difference is that the Korea is top-down in terms of the building a consensus, making decision. But German, on the other hand, people like their voice to be heard when it comes to the decision making. So you probably remind yourself, okay, you mentioned that the Germany is quite, power distance perspective is quite low compared to the other. Yes, that is still relation. So Germany is still hierarchical, but in terms of the power distance, they still feel like they have right to speak out. In my opinion, that makes the differences. Then another article from Erin Meyer, 2015, from her Business Review, and she also indicated that there is a difference in terms of how people expressing emotion. There is a common thing between Germany and Korea. They both suppress their emotion. You're not angry easily. But nevertheless, when it comes to the discussion, German are confrontational. Korean or Asian general, you know, that they try to avoid the confrontational. So putting all this learning into the very short, compact key summary, we can say the Korean society or Korean culture show, in terms of the business, that has top-down decision-making, and people have a tendency of looking for the long-term perspective, not specifically meaning that there is a clear strategy for the long term. You have to differentiate this. And the people focusing on the more group or organization over themselves. And when it comes to the discussion, when it comes to the consensus building, still people try to avoid the confrontation. So you have to imagine what kind of situation could be made when the Korean company coming to Germany and they start working with the German colleague. Because German colleagues want their voice to be heard when it comes to the decision making. And German, very important that even cooperation respecting my individualism. And when it comes to the expression of the emotion, when it comes to the discussion, they don't mind to speak out very clearly and don't avoid confrontational. There is now clear contrast. So what do we do now? How can we bring this two a bit closer? From now on, it is purely based on my personal experience of working more than a decade in a Korean company in Germany, working with a Korean management with a German colleague as HR. I already placed it here, 3 suggestions. Number 1, so top-down, long-term orientation, it have to be translated into the midterm plan. So I will explain to you why I emphasize the midterm instead of long-term plan. And collectivism have to be also pushed or transformed into the more team spirit or team system. I will explain to you what I mean by this. And avoid confrontational have to be to systematic decision making. The example here that I'll try to put somehow storytelling way so that you can easily follow. And what I wanted to tell you is I'm focusing on strictly here my experience comparing Korean company in Germany. But final implication is yours because you all working in the multicultural environment, regardless whether you are working in German company or US, American or French company. So implication is yours. So employee in Korean companies sometimes believe that long-term strategy is not important because it can be changed by the company owner. Many Korean companies equate risk and uncertainty with opportunity. People are more likely to be faced with a great challenge or more complex tasks to test their commitment. Korean place high value on perseverance because it's geared toward long-term goal and may sacrifice present happiness. Germans, on the other hand, are known to be slow in implementing changes, are used to doing things as they are planned. Germans expect their opinion to be taken into account in decision-making process as part of the consensus procedure. In Korean company in Germany, employer often confused in this time German employee about the strategic direction of the company because what is your strategy? Why it change so quickly? And they may doubt their commitment of the corporation at all. Do you have a serious commitment doing the business in this country? In Germany, and become frustrated because they even think that it's quite unclear what is my contribution toward this business. So we have to do some treatment, top-down, long-term orientation into strategic business planning and midterm strategy. It sounds like quite self-explanatory, but important is how we are operating, in my opinion. And to bring, if you wanted to bring a bit of the German culture to the Korean company, then my recommendation, you guys have to emphasize ambition, either in the company core value or competency. How do we know whether we are doing okay in this perspective, in this term? If my company has established the business planning, and in this business planning, all stakeholders in each business participating, actively involving, and company has midterm strategy, what we want to do in Germany for midterm. Midterm, I want to say here 2 to 3 years. It doesn't have to be longer than that, so that people have some clarity. And the company continues to emphasize and communicating this midterm strategy. And my company communicate its high ambition or perseverance through the company's core value or competence. In terms of the collectivism, in high collectivity organization, individualism can be seen as selfishness. In such a society, personal sacrifice are often seen as demonstration of loyalty to the group, even if they do not benefit the group sometimes. Typical behavior has been, you can witness in this culture, that long working hour, being present in the office. German has grown up in the environment where roles are relatively well defined, and it is very important to know where my work starts and work ends. Without this understanding, German may be seen or perceived by the Korean executive as disloyal, as selfish, or lazy. In this situation, German employee may come to the conclusion that the company is too demanding, and my evaluation is not rational, and as a result, I will give up my performance here. So, to bring the collectivism and long-term orientation to closer, so companies have to have a clear R&R, regardless of whether you are small or big. And you have to emphasize work-life balance, focusing on what is really benchmarking, what is really happening in the local market, not is coming from the global headquarters. To bring a bit of individualism, you have to facilitate the team spirit and team building, and emphasizing also what kind of a corporate we are. As a self-evaluation, my company has a clearly defined organization hierarchy and reporting structure. It sounds like very, very self-explanatory, but you know that small company open time when they're starting, they don't have any structure. And people in my company has a clear understanding what the other departments are working, not only my department and my team. And when there is a change of the organization, when there's change in the people, and company explain to them, open time, even in the big organization, we do not communicate in such a change. My company has program in place to share the corporate culture from the global company, and my company understanding the importance of the diversity and inclusion to hear the voice of the different people. And my company time management policy or approach to the work-life balance is kind of local market oriented. Not that is bring from the global headquarters, this is what we offer. The last but not least, so confrontation. Both country I mentioned is hierarchical, and top-down hierarchical culture, however, not the consensus oriented culture, and even seeking to avoid the confrontation, there is oftentimes a detour where the discussion is just discussion and decision made somewhere else. In this culture, consensus building meeting is often seen as kind of presenting idea. Yeah, it doesn't have to be necessarily going to the decision making. When also there is a disagreement that rise in the meeting, and Korean often use another communication method, another meeting, different format, in order to avoid confrontation. German view, not only German, but I'm using the German here, view that this consensus and decision are more logical conclusion and reach through dialogue, and when we agree, that is agreed and ready to go. German co-worker and also are rather blunt and try to be clear and direct comparably. In this situation, German colleagues misunderstand when he comes to the meeting and misunderstand the conclusion of the meeting. And the Korean colleague think the German colleague doesn't understand the fine line. So avoid the confrontation and top-down culture to bring them a bit closer. I suggest the company have a quite consensus structured decision-making process. Do not be frustrated because when not understanding how our decision is made, why we feel like that we discussed already. Please set up the agreed decision-making process. This is how we are making a decision. It can be the system, it doesn't have to be system, but it is about agreement. About the confrontation side, you have to build up kind of the feedback session, bottom-up feedback session. Right? So you can also set up the meeting culture if there is a wider gap in understanding what we do in the meeting. And also you build a kind of survey, or you build a kind of the meeting session or workshop session to bring the different voice to the upward. Self-evaluation. So my company has rule for making a decision. And the individual decision can be also found again when necessary, because it is store that made the decision. My company share in advance what kind of purpose we have in the meeting. Is it kind of just brainstorming? Is it kind of decision making? Is it consensus building? That's quite self-explanatory. My company has process of accepting and analyzing, improving bottom-up feedback. And my company has procedure accepting and sorry, this is kind of the copy-paste, looks like. So if you have this one, in my opinion, you are quite good to go. Why you are saying that? So now going to the final slide in my presentation, so I speed up a bit. So with that effort, in my opinion, over the at least in Net Promotion Score, so our employee answer with the score of 67. So if you are familiar with the kind of the Net Promotion Score, this is a relatively high. It's not kind of great, but it is a quite good score. And I also recently got to know that our company is listed as a top company in 2024 without me knowing that it's happening, meaning that people inside, outside are giving a good feedback as a good company. Thank you very much. That has been my presentation.